Good morning and welcome to the show. This is Newday Saturday edition. It is the 19th day of May 2018 and we are happy to be here. We are live on TV3 here in Accra. We are also live on 3FM 92.7 and we're streaming live around the world at 3news.com. Also on our Facebook page, TV3 Ghana. As usual, we're running from now till 9:50 where conversations will be brought to a close. As usual, we also encourage you to send through your messages, your contributions, whatever it is you have to share regarding topics that I will be outlining very soon to our WhatsApp number 050060770 and we will share them with the rest of the world. Today, quite a lot of interesting topics we've outlined for conversation. Indeed, a number of interesting things happening this week. We'll start off with the exchange of gunfire between the military and the police in Tamale earlier on in the week. Now, we thought we had seen the height of indiscipline come from political party vigilante groups, but apparently the police and the military in Tamale this week had something up their sleeve to unleash on us. Exactly what happened there when gunfire was exchanged between the military and police in the north. So the police, we are told, dared, quote unquote, to arrest a military man for allegedly breaking the law, alleged assault, it's reported. Now, that was commendable, but what ensued after that is quite distasteful when the person who was arrested apparently escaped police custody and returned to the barracks to mobilize his colleagues who then came back to launch an attack on the police, and thereafter there was exchange of gunfire. Question is, what would cause such hostilities between these two state agencies who are mandated to keep law and order and maintain peace? The panel this morning will be interrogating this matter and try to see exactly what happened, if indeed there are any solutions to this growing, rather unwanted, feature in our democracy. Also up for conversation is the mobile money interoperability brouhaha. You do know by now that the mobile money interoperability system was launched sometime last week by the Vice President. Now, following the launch, it has come to light that the contract sum for the entire project is $4.6 million. That's about some 20 million Ghana cedis, and that the project is being executed by the Ghana Interbank Payment and Settlement Systems Limited, GIPS for short. And this is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Bank of Ghana. Now, the contract sum of $4.6 million has since the launch been compared with the contract sum of 4.6 billion Ghana cedis, which was the price that this whole project or a similar project was to have been undertaking under the administration of John Dramani Mahama. Now, people are asking whether this is a fair comparison, given that there are those who share the opinion or have the opinion that the two contract sums and what each amount entitled the nation to cannot be compared, because that would amount to comparing antelopes and elephants. We shall be delving into this development to ascertain exactly what the scope or functionality of the system is and whether or not the prices that were quoted at various points in time are justified. We'll also turn our attention to developments at TOR and the Ministry of Energy, and there seems to be a growing controversy over the potential scrapping of the Tema oil refinery. Now, the Energy Ministry is considering the possibility of turning TOR into a tank farm for the sole purpose of storing fuel, but the Chief Executive Officer of TOR and his board chairman have kicked against the decision, saying that they are able to turn TOR around. We shall be looking at the developments coming out of this sector and what the rationale behind government's decision or intention to convert TOR into a tank farm is. We'll look at that against the position of TOR officials. Again, we'll be turning our attention to some very important social issues, and here we're looking at mental health. Now, the Mental Health Authority this week lamented about the state of affairs with its institutions in the country. We are being told that almost halfway into the year, the psychiatric institutions in the country have not received any budgetary allocations. Now the question is, what is causing this? Indeed, the situation has led to the situation where the institutions are depending on credit and actually running on credit, leading to several lawsuits against the institutions. Why do we overburden an already burdened institution in the mental health delivery system to take on so much? We'll be looking at this situation and why mental health seems to be at the tail end of policies and implementation of policies when we look at it critically. And we'll also be looking at the pursuit of justice in respect of the killing of some 44 Ghanaian nationals in the Gambia back in 2005. Now, 13 years after that gruesome murders, we are being told that the only surviving, or one of the surviving people, is leading a campaign to obtain justice for the deceased. Now, this person is being supported by human rights organizations, and they are claiming that they have some evidence that would lead to a successful prosecution of Mr. Yahya Jammeh, the former leader of the Gambia. We shall be looking at this particular information coming out as opposed to that which was put together by a joint committee of the United Nations and ECOWAS that suggested that Mr. Jammeh indeed was not culpable in terms of giving orders to the people who ended up killing these migrants. Indeed, it promises to be an interesting conversation on the show this morning. You don't want to miss any part of it. Stick and stay with us. We'll be back after this break. Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Newday Saturday edition live on TV3, also live on 3FM 92.7. I will introduce the panelists for today's conversations and we'll dig straight into the topics for today's conversations. We have from my extreme left, Mr. Joseph Albert Kwam. He is the Honourable Member of Parliament for Mansong Kwanta constituency. Also is, we have Mr. Yawapong. He is a private legal practitioner. We also have Dr. Abdul Rashid Pilpo, MP for Wa Central and former Minister of State in charge of public-private partnerships. Good morning, gentlemen. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I must add that we're expecting a fourth panelist, so when he comes in, we'll do the needful and introduce him accordingly, but we'll carry on with the conversations with the three in the studio at the moment. We'll start off today's conversations with a look at the exchange of gunfire between the police and the military in Tamale earlier on in the week, and it's been actually condemned by all sides, and we'll be looking at it, how this happened, what exactly is to be done to curtail or to curb the recurrence of such acts. We have the regional commander, Patrick Eduse Poku. I think we will take a listen to some things he had to say and then return to the panel.
With or without the military, security will always be maintained in the northern region. But be assured that we will work together with them. As we speak now, the military are taking the lead at Bibla. We are not going now. We will join them later because we have other issues at hand. We have other violent situations that we have to attend to before we deploy fully to Bibla. So if there's that bad bluff between the police and the military, they wouldn't prepare to take the lead for us to also to follow. Especially when internal security, the police should always be in the lead. And that tells you that there's still good relationship between the police and the military.
We know that the police together with the military are on this operation Calm Life. After the first scuffle between these two groups, your people and them, they kind of withdrew from the Operation Calm Life, and recently they went back. Today there is another scuffle. They have been called back to the barracks. Are we seeing them come to duty tonight?
Yeah,
and how is the relationship going to be like?
No, we still, notwithstanding this impasse, we are still at good relationship. We still have good relationship with the military, and we continue to work together. You see, when the military withdrew in the previous instance, it wasn't because of the situation between the police and the military. There were some technical problems.
Okay.
One was fuel for the exercise.
Okay.
Yeah, it became a problem where fuel for the exercise became a major issue. And that is why you bear me out that we met with the filling station and managers in Tamale as to what support they can offer. So it wasn't like because of what has happened between the police and the military, else they would have come back again. But that wasn't the issue. So be assured that we will continue to work with them. We are not enemies. The fact that a little issue have arisen between the police and the military and has degenerated into a situation none of us expected it, and none of us are happy about. That doesn't mean that we are not going to work together or we see ourselves as enemies. That will not happen.
Great. So that was the Northern Regional Commander there speaking to our correspondent in there. He makes mention of the fact that, well, they are not enemies. That is, the police and the military are not enemies, and that he refers to it as a little issue. Obviously not a little issue. We'll be looking at that. Honorable Pilpo, I would start with you here. What do you make of this whole incident? Like I said, the regional commander there is, assuring us that everything is okay. They're trying to, sort things out. There's been some committees set up to ensure coexistence between the two security agencies. But obviously, this can't be described as a little issue, can it?
No, it's a very, good morning to all our viewers, and wish you all the best. Happy Ramadan, and good morning to WA Central, and I wish you all the best in this year's Ramadan fasting. Essentially, I think that it's a very, very dangerous situation for those who are supposed to keep the security to find themselves in a deadlock, in a situation where, they themselves are beating each other, fighting each other, at the expense of the rest of us who are willing to part our taxes to take care of them. The challenge, the bigger challenge is that the security, law and order are breaking down, around them. And the rot is beginning to show in the surface. It happened once in March this year, and then it's repeated. And just then, there's another situation we are having in Tumu,
right,
where an irate youth attacked the police after one person was chased to his death, and then another also fired and killed. So we have a challenge, and we need to take it very seriously. The security in Ghana is an essential element for our peace. Wherever there's a breakdown in security, then everything else means nothing else, nothing. Because if people lose their fear of the police and lose their respect for the army and fear for the army, then it becomes a problem. Nothing else will stop them from doing what they want to do.
Right.
Yeah.
But let me ask this. What do you think accounts for this brazen display of indiscipline, lawlessness? I mean, I describe this as a height of indiscipline, that two state security agencies to be caught up in this kind of, I don't even know how to describe it. But what do you think accounts for it?
A lot of indiscipline, a lot of lack of condor, lack of training, lack of accountability for what they do. And if you look at the story, a military man beats up his wife, and under normal circumstance, if somebody reports that you have beat somebody, you have to be apprehended.
Right.
So it was not wrong for the police to arrest the military person, except that maybe the way he's treated might also be a problem. And he breaking jail or running away from arrest is an obstruction of justice by itself and shouldn't have happened at all. So it's all about knowing who they are. The police must know who they are. The military must know who they are. He should not have run away. He should have succumbed to the situation of arrest and perhaps go through the normal process of securing a bail, you know, but to run away from the police arrest itself was unacceptable. So if you ask what has accounted to, you know, for this bizarre situation of indiscipline and actions and reactions, I would say that is because of what I described earlier as a general rot. You know, the training that they receive is questionable, and the general command that allows you to show respect to law and order is also questionable.
Very well. Now, Mr. Paul, the reports have it that when this military man was arrested for alleged assault, he was, you know, taken into police custody, but his colleagues didn't understand why he had been arrested and interrogated over an alleged assault. And then subsequently he escaped and went into the barracks, brought them on board. Is there a sense that, I mean, do you get this sense that the military perhaps see themselves as over and above the law? Indeed, I think there's a certain history to that, and we all do know that, because there are certain instances that certain comments will be passed to make it seem as though, well, the military is of a certain kind, you know, you need to treat them with that kind of thing. Do you think that fuels this kind of occurrences?
Well, thank you very much and good morning. I think so to some extent. And over the years, because of the peculiar nature of the job that is assigned the military, and over time we've seen them as persons who must kill, maim, and destroy our enemies. And so that feeds into sometimes the psychology and the whole architecture of the training. They are to, it is vested in them all the powers, the enormous powers of the states, sometimes mostly vicious, so that they can destroy, destroy our enemies. And so, and you will see that over time, whilst we have taken effort, expended energy and resources to reform the police. There used to be police force. Right. Now we've removed that and made it a service. I don't think we have expended that much energy in reforming the army or the military, because for us, they are to kill our enemies anyway. So why should we even cause the whole legal framework and institutional framework to be reformed? But in the modern times that we live in, it is not so much. Honorable mentioned trading. It's very important. Now it's all about, substantially about intelligence, technology. We don't, even in the days of the Trojan War, intelligence was used, and that is how they were able to defeat the enemies thousands of years ago. So this idea that you must go to the bush sometimes at Achiase, those who have lived in Achiase and the enclave will tell you, they've been through a lot of vicious mistreatment and so on. You let him come for your girlfriend or your sister and complain. They will go and regroup. But of course, majority of the military over the years are fine gentlemen and women. And so, but as I said, sometimes that one bad knot, yes, can destroy the taste of the soup. So that is how we've seen them, even under the legal framework. A military officer, a person in the army, may be detained for 90 days without trial, or whilst he goes through the trial. We have gone past it. The police used to do that to us. And so in the wisdom of the framers of our constitution and the general laws, we said 48 hours. If you are not prepared to charge the person and present him before court, then release him. Until such time that you are ready, then you present him to court. I understand that there could be war situations where it will not be prudent to just release the person within 40. An army officer who has turned against his own state, it may not be prudent to release him. But we need to take the entire Armed Forces Act 105 and do a serious holistic overhauling of not just the law and its amendment and the regulations, but the whole institution. We need to have a conscious effort.
What about it specifically, or just a few, perhaps maybe three?
Yes, I mean, for example,
really need some.
I see where the soldiers are coming from, because they have court martial. And so, and I had one very senior retired military officer on another platform wondering why it is the police that should put an army officer in custody. Over the years, we haven't been able to delineate where or in respect of which offenses court-martial should try and which offenses, even if committed by an army officer, the normal civil court, in terms of the generality of the courts that have criminal jurisdiction, should also try them. And that is why they usually will resist not just the arrest and detention, but even trial.
But if this exists, why would the police do what they did?
That's what I'm saying, that we have not been able to understand which offenses, but the act here has spelled out some of these. They must be related to the service laws. If it's not in relation to the service laws, then the police generally have in fact, all of us have the right, in fact, the duty to arrest anyone who commits an offense in our presence, whether in the army or not. But we have to let the military in general, and even the rest of us, understand what exactly is an offense that is committed and that relates to the jurisdiction of the court-martial. Otherwise, these things will go on over time. And the second thing, as I said, is about the reformation. It appears that we haven't really, and when you talk to some of the army officers, I tell you, they are not also happy. I mean, I had the privilege to deal with an appeal from, against a court-martial decision. And now I was surprised to learn some of the things that are in it. Unfortunately, by the time at the time the person came to see me, he had already served 3 months' time. The Court of Appeal set it aside.
Right.
The entire decision of the court-martial was set aside. But if he had been in the ordinary court under the Constitution, he could have gone to the Supreme Court for even compensation, because you could see the travesty of justice. I'm not saying that it's peculiar to them. What I'm saying is that
it needs reform.
Yes, we should make a conscious effort to take the entire act, which was passed in 1962, for a particular purpose. I mean, the vestiges of colonialism were still part of us, and so mind you, the police also used to be somehow like this substantially. The danger now is, as the soldiers in particular, we are told, are the ones that bring the war to the police, continue to do that, the idea of a police service will also gradually be eroded. And they will also then take up what it meant to them to be a police force. The danger is that it is not the military that they may extend their spleen on. It is we, the ordinary citizens, who live with them in the communities. We are the ones that are going to suffer, and we will go back. So, for example, the very reason why we gave them, remember the Preventive Detention Act. You could detain anyone on just mere suspicion and throw him to custody for whatever, at the pleasure of, for example, the Minister for Interior. Now we have changed that. Why can't we also change order? So all these frustrations put together can then create the kind of military that we have now. And so we shouldn't be surprised, in my view, to hear these things going on. The danger is that, as I'm saying, it will spill over. Yes, it will spill over to us. And it's important, the training again. Why should we still, and sometimes it's like assault. I don't think that in these modern days, the entirety or the majority of the army officers should go through a kind of brutish training. And then when, by the grace of God, we haven't been at war for since I was born, I think. And when they travel outside, they don't go there to fight generally. They peacekeeping, they call it. Right. So why can't we also, then in the generality of the legal and institutional framework, fashion out these laws and the entire training to the extent that, as we see them around, will let, in their mind, to see that they are part of the peacekeeping process in Ghana, or peace-maintaining process and law-maintaining process in Ghana, and not that, and so until there's war, of course, against our enemies, they should also see themselves as the police to maintain peace, law, and order. Right. And I think that when we do that, to some extent, so I sympathize with the soldiers and maybe empathize with the police, whichever way. Exactly. Because we have made it to be like that.
Very
the
well.
barrel system and all that will have to be looked at again.
Very well. So reforms there clearly to the law and how the training and everything else goes with it. But to Honorable Kwam, the news reports also have it that the regional minister, I mean, definitely he condemned it. He condemned it. But he asked the heads of the Interior and Defense ministries to transfer the regional commanders if the regional commanders cannot, you know, as it were, maintain control on the men on their men on the ground. Do you think a transfer is what is required in this instance? Would that solve the problem?
Anyway, let me use this opportunity to greet your cherished listeners and that of my constituency, the people in my constituency.
Manson Kwanta.
Yeah, Manson Kwanta. Yes. The people are so dear to me, honestly.
It's important.
Yes. My sister, in the case of the regional minister's issue, I would treat it as an allegation because for now I don't have facts.
That's why I said it's reported. That's what is reported.
Exactly.
And if that's the case, do you think?
I don't think that is the way it's supposed to be. But if you look at the issue in its totality, when the crash happened, I'm so happy about the quick intervention of the joint police and military intervention, because this is actually what will let them go into the matter and see how they can address it. Yesterday in Parliament, Speaker of Parliament also summoned the Interior and Defense Minister to appear on Tuesday to come and give an account of the totality of the whole thing. I mean, that is how it's supposed to be. And going forward, I think that we shouldn't leave this issue to the joint military and police to handle the case, because we must have a third force. We have National Security Council. They are all under that umbrella. And I feel that with that platform, when they are being brought to that platform, certainly they are going to iron the issue and bring the perpetrators to book.
What are the issues?
No, here, right now, there's a crash. But my sister, let me tell you this. If you look at military, we all know how disciplined they are. So right now, if some of them are resorting
with these acts.
Sorry?
I'm saying clearly that doesn't seem to be the case with these
Exactly.
things happening.
But we are all under rule of law, and nobody is above the law in this country. So if there is anything that's going to erode the rule of law of this nation, there's the need for them to investigate the issue and bring the perpetrators to book. I will not cite what happened yesterday or what happened today. But the most important thing is that what does our law say? And we all have the moral right to respect our rule of law. We shouldn't give the military the chance to behave the way in which we have cited some examples. I will say that once it has happened here or there, does not mean that they are not working. Just as my brother, Dr. Pepu said, in fact, the way he was going, he was more or less sounding a bit political. Because if you look at it, a breakdown of...
He said yes, there is. I mean, I asked him what would account or could have accounted for such an incident.
You see,
that is... Overall, he thinks
that is why there's the need for us going forward to come together and see how we address this issue. Because we shouldn't give them the chance to brutalize people in a manner in which they are supposed to be.
And if you're saying nobody's above the law, then definitely when such incidents happen, we need to, enforce the laws.
Exactly.
And then, but that's what Mr. Opon here said, that there seems to be a struggle between how far do we go into, bringing the military under the mainstream, regime governing criminal offenses, put aside the court-martial system provided under the military.
Yeah, I share with him. I share with him to the extent that if a military officer commit a crime, are they saying that they have a court-martial? So based on that, the person should be tried there. Yes, right from the beginning, the person must be apprehended. But because they have these two, they are part of the National Security Council, at least consultations can be made in order to bring the two together, so that if there's the need for them to transfer the military officer from the police cells, that has to be done. But for them to to forget about everything, the process that they need to follow, and go straight to the police cells to brutalize those people over there, destroying their properties, I think it's not the best. And that is why, my own personal opinion, I feel that they have National Security Council, and they have to be brought to that umbrella for them to solve the problem once and for all.
Very well, thank you. Let me introduce quickly Mr. Selon Brantier. He is the Vice President of Imani Africa, joining us on the show. Welcome.
Thank you.
It's good to have you. I hope I got your name right.
Yeah, you got it right.
Very
Spot
well.
on.
Good. So we're looking at this, this tension between the police and the military in Tamale, which led to this unfortunate incident. I mean, it's been condemned all round, but we are looking at what could have caused that. A number of, opinions have been shared here. I would want to put that to you again, and then let me know exactly what your perspective about this whole development.
Well, I think that first of all, the army or army officers have had this for quite a while now. Have had this power, if I'll put it that way, where they believe that because by virtue of the fact that they are in the green camouflages, they can do anything at anywhere at any time. I think it smacks of indiscipline for a particular unit that is usually always commended for being one of the most disciplined, even across Africa. I think it's probably a throwback from the days or the times when military juntas were running the country, and therefore they had this, or they have, some of them still have this opinion of being above, or feeling of being above the law, and therefore believing that because they would have backing from their friends in the barracks, they can come on rampage at any time without any consequences. I also believe that is also one of the throwbacks from military regimes when they were the law, basically. And so when they try to superimpose that kind of mentality in the public, then the consequence of this is some of what we are seeing. However, I believe that between the police and the military too, there should have been much more in terms of cooperation and far more level-headed approaches to the current scenario. I think that even as the things began, the situation began escalating, or right from the very beginning, the heads of the police in the region should have contacted the whether the regiment or the battalion or whichever it is in that region, the heads over there, so that they began solving that problem right from the top before it went down. Because usually the officers are of a different, almost usually of a different kind of caliber than the men or the other ranks. And therefore, it should have been handled right from the top hierarchy before it descended down, to the point where it became what you call a slugfest or free-for-all. But in all of this, both parties need to be reprimanded severely, because I don't know how to put it in a way that is not what do you call it, stereotyped, but previous activities in those vicinities have meant that there has been the need for extra security in that area. And for that reason, if those who are supposed to maintain the peace are the ones who are now brawling, then what does it say for security in that area? Especially when within the last 10, 15 years, there have been spots of sporadic violence around the area. And what does it say if they are escalating to that point? Even if something happened at that particular moment in time, would they have been able to cooperate and respond responsibly to any other threat in that area? So those who have been stationed there, both the police and the army, should have realized that they had a bigger need to serve than their personal egos. Right. And actually, in military training, I've been a cadet, officer before in the university. One of the first things you are supposed to throw away is your ego. And you throw away your personal ego and subscribe to what we call a chain of command. So if in this particular case, these people were unruly, they really have to face whatever sanctions there are. If it is, a court-martial or whatever it is, the military police needs to step in and arrest those people from the military side and then follow due procedure as it is, because they have been unruly and then they have disgraced the uniform. And there are sanctions that go with that. Although I don't know, I've forgotten the actual full sanction details, but some swift action needs to be done, and it must be publicized so that it serves as a deterrent to anybody who's thinking about doing such a thing.
About doing that. Now, I mean, it's for me to hear that a joint committee has to be set up in order to ensure coexistence between the military and police. I find that rather worrying that have we reached that point where there's so much hostility that you need that overriding or overarching entity or body to ensure coexistence? Isn't that quite worrying?
It is, because then it signifies a failure of leadership between the two security forces. As when I say leadership, I'm not talking about the general leader, but I'm talking about the local leadership there. It signifies a failure of leadership, because a commander is supposed to command his troops according to a certain code of discipline, according to a certain code of honor, according to a certain code of practice. Now, although there are situations where, in reality on the ground, you will have personal, interpersonal interactions, sort of, you would expect that professionalism above all would reign. Because you are in a situation where, as a soldier or as a policeman, you have been trained for a long period of time to let procedure kick in. That is why they go through all those drills. So if after all those drills, after all that training, you still allow these situations to escalate in this manner, it means that there's a failure of leadership, there's a failure of discipline.
So in other words, you should have like a quick response to
there
things
should be a
when they
quick
happen.
And snappy response to this. There should be actually, from this point forward, a certain procedure in terms of when it comes to situations escalating like this, which should be documented, and everybody should be trained to react in that protocol. That is what proactive armies do. That's what proactive security institutions do, because ultimately whoever you are as an officer or whatever, your personal feelings don't matter. It is what needs to persist. The status quo of peace or tranquility or harmony or social security is what is paramount.
Overriding.
Yes.
Right, very well. I think we'll end the conversation on the gunfire exchange between the police and military in Tamale here and go straight to look at the mobile money interoperability brouhaha. We do have a soundbite of the Vice President. Let's take a listen to it and then let me return to the panel.
When I first became aware of this, it was a situation where 3 companies apparently bid for the right to provide payment system, the interoperability, payment system of interoperability. One company bid 14 million Ghana cedis to provide that payment system and interoperability. Another company, for the same scope of work, bid 5 million Ghana cedis. And yet a third company, for the same scope of work, bid 4.6 billion Ghana cedis. And guess who won? 4.6 billion Ghana cedis won that bid. What are we trying to provide? Interoperability. And we have been able to do it for $4.5 million instead of the $1 billion. And we have become the leading country in interoperability in Ghana. So what other scope were you thinking about?
Okay, so that was Vice President there speaking about the contract SAMs involved in the implementation of the mobile money interoperability system. Quite a number of billions there, 4.6 billion Ghana cedis and $4.6 million. In fact, I get confused with the figures, but long and short is 2 transactions, one under the previous administration, to have cost the nation some $4.6 billion. That contract was abrogated when this government took office and had a new one with the GIBS, that's the Ghana Interbank Payment and Settlement Systems, for less, and that was $4.6 million. I mean, converted into cedis, you're looking around they're about 18 million Ghana cedis. So definitely this comparison has come up strongly. And of course, the minority is not taking this lightly. They're coming back to say, well, you may be comparing apples and oranges because the scope of what SIPTIN switch systems, I think, yes, was going to do was way over and above what GIBS has done. Question is, what is the difference, or what is it really the same? Honorable Pilpo, you are saying it's not. So what would have been the added, if you like, the enhancement that would have justified the several millions that this government is saying has saved for the nation?
Well, thank you. As we all know, this is a service that is supposed to help us use our mobile phones, link with our bank accounts possibly, and be able to do transactions with easement. And so it's a whole system, a novel system that is going to take place, and this platform is what we are talking about. That will enable interoperability between the 2 different platforms, the banking and the mobile industry and all that. And what the former NDC government did was to throw it out to the business community or the private sector, you know, to bid. And according to what we are reading and being told today, that one company, SIPTIN Switch, won the contract, and what they intended doing was to make sure that they finance everything over a 20-year period, during which they would mobilize money, they would raise money to the tune of 4.6 billion Ghana cedis.
Okay, that's Ghana cedis, yeah.
Yeah, so that in the end, the state was going to benefit, you know, but the present regime finds that odd and decided that they were going to team up with the Bank of Ghana to do it, and they did it at about 4.6 million Ghana cedis. Now the difference is that 4.6 million cedis is paid by Bank of Ghana towards the operations and the establishment of the system.
$4.6 million.
Yes. Sorry, $4.6 million. And so Ghana has paid $4.6 million. Under the previous regime, with SIPTIN coming in, nobody would have paid anything. In fact, nobody would have been, Ghana government wouldn't have been the financier of this project. They have decided that we will finance the whole system, and we will make sure that we raise money up to that amount within a period of 20 years with the operations of So I wasn't surprised when...
How was that going to be possible? So no, definitely they would have to make their money, their private entity.
Yeah, you raise the money, you pay yourself, and we tax you and make money as well. So it's going to be, it would have been a win-win situation. In fact, it's a way of propping up a private sector entity that has an idea that would lift off the burden of payment from government.
But let me ask this quickly. The GIPS, which is the Ghana Interbank Payment and Settlement System, is a wholly owned subsidiary of Bank of Ghana.
Yes.
So as it were, as a state institution or a state entity.
Yes.
That had the expertise, the infrastructure and everything to do this job. So question is, why did we even have to go beyond GIPS to, as it were, throw it out to people to bid when we already had an institution that could do the job?
Well, it's all about policy and direction. And in the previous government, that was the policy's thrust, that we get the private sector involved and allow the private sector to interface with the Bank of Ghana and be able to set up this platform and system which will benefit everybody.
Then what would be the essence of GIPS then?
GIPS would still be in operation.
Be doing what specifically?
And perhaps would have been in cooperation with the private entity, working towards the objective that we are all looking at. But the private entity had a plan of multiplying the income, creating more value. And I wasn't surprised when one Mr. Lawson, who is supposed to be the chief executive of the Sipton company, said that the vice president was not speaking. I mean, he used the word which I don't want to use. It's wrong to attack our vice president that way. But he said that he wasn't speaking. He wasn't saying the right things, and that what he was saying was unacceptable considering what was available. So I can only speak within the broad outlines of what happened, and I can also say that nobody would want to subject your own country to such to any pay. Yeah, it may just simply be because of reasons that I've explained, that this private sector entity was wishing or was willing to go the extra length in raising money. And I heard him saying also that we are now going to pay more in 20 years than he is providing. Because if you look at what is provided now, running up to the period 20 years, and compared to what he is providing, and the rates, the present rate is 2.5. His rate was 1.5. And if you compare the rates, that would have meant that we would have been paying more in 20 years.
Obviously, I mean, he would definitely want to defend his pitch, which had to be abrogated when this government came in. But let me ask this quickly and then move to the other panelists. Maybe people have suggested that comparing what Sipton was going to offer and what GIPS is offering now is comparing elephants and antelopes. Let's look at the system where, so there was people tendered, for this job. And as we heard the vice president in that clip, he gave examples of 3 companies, same bid, right? I mean, for the same job. One came with 14 million Ghana cedis, the other 5 million Ghana cedis. A third company for the same scope of work bid, 4.6 billion Ghana cedis. And the 4.6 billion Ghana cedis won that bid, which is interesting because, like I'm saying, granted, assuming without admitting that indeed what we're doing post-Sipton is comparing apples and oranges. Let's look at the case where we're looking at companies bidding for the same job, different figures, but we chose the one that was very, very expensive. Would that, does that speak positively about the value for money principles that we claim to have or we would want to apply when it comes to procurement options?
That's granted if they were to do the same scope of work.
Granted, which is what they put in their bids for.
No, the winner would have be more creative, more extensive. It's not asking for money from you. These ones are saying, pay me this. And these ones say, you don't have to pay me. I will create money. I'll put up the infrastructure myself. In addition, I'm going to raise this amount of money. And that's the overall impact it's going to create in the Ghanaian economy. Maybe it's so convincing that it is possible that they would go in for that. It's just like the Kaswa projects. When it came up, people were talking about the fact that it was too much and too high, the cost was too high. But when they got to know the full import of the costs involved, then people started sitting back to reason much more deeply, because it involved constructing schools and hospitals along the line for every stretch of, the stretch of the roads that was constructed. So they didn't take into consideration the extra effort put by the contractor when he was bidding. So that's how it is. Sometimes, if you are not inside, if you are not an insider about these things, you might not understand. I just hope that those who signed the contract, who agreed to that contract, will be speaking now, so that we all get to know the full impact of it, import of it. We are observing from our side, and it might not be adequate enough,
to make these conclusions or not. Very well. We'll take a break. When we come back, the other panelists will have their piece on this mobile money interoperability system and the brouhaha that has come with it, looking at the two figures, 4.6 billion Ghana cedis as against $4.6 million. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Newday Saturday Edition. We're live on TV3, also live on 3FM 92.7, and we're streaming live around the world at 3news.com. Also on our Facebook page at TV3 Ghana. We're still looking at the mobile money interoperability system and the tale of two deals, looking at 4.6 billion Ghana cedis as against $4.6 million, which is around 18 million Ghana cedis. Honorable Pelpo told us his perspective of it and what the minority, back then majority, sought to do with their transaction with Sipton Switch Systems Limited. But I'll be moving on to Mr. Brantier, who is a tech person, to give us some insights into this and let us understand exactly what the functionalities of the system as proposed by Sipton Switch and what is being executed by Gibbs is, to see whether or not we could actually justify what Sipton was proposing in terms of the 4.6 billion Ghana cedis.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that when it comes to matters of technology and procurement around technology, a lot of political decision makers or non-technology, decision makers are usually hoodwinked by some of those who bid for these contracts, because I would understand it actually quite requires a bit of in-depth knowledge.
But isn't that why policymakers should consult the experts when it comes to these things, when they're making these decisions?
Oh, exactly, they should. But then,
so why the hoodwink?
For maybe decision-making constraints or preferences or whatever reason, I would not want to say corruption here, which is usually the 600-pound gorilla in the room, but I wouldn't say that. So let's just break everything down into bits. What Gibbs wanted, or what the Bank of Ghana wanted as a regulator, is to be able to have an interoperability system, because mobile money system is such that people were exchanging the money only inside their networks. In about 5 or 6 or 7 different countries across Africa, they have been able to do the interoperability. Kenya is one, Tanzania is one, quite a few others. It has become a new way of exchanging money between people, and therefore, obviously, there was a time when there would be the need for that convergence.
It had actually revolutionized.
It actually revolutionized it, yes. In places like Kenya, it's a huge chunk of their GDP. Now, the situation we are looking at is that if the mobile phone companies themselves that do the mobile money in Ghana right now already have the infrastructure that could have made them do the interconnectivity on their own. So let's put that one aside. They had the infrastructure to do it on their own. Then the government decides that, okay, maybe for whatever reasons, maybe because of revenue assurance, supervision, oversight, etc., they would want to intervene in the process. And therefore, they decide
even though that intervention really wasn't necessary.
At the very basis of it, it wasn't even necessary because apart from even the mobile phone companies having the infrastructure, there are private companies that had built similar infrastructure to interconnect some of these things. So once the government decided to do that, already it has taken, potential revenue out of the hands of entrepreneurs who had invested money and resources and time into developing some of these systems. And some of them have really been hit hard. So that is one. Two, you have this system, you say you want to have oversight over it. Maybe for revenue assurance purposes, maybe for the fact that you want an even playing field, maybe the fact that you want a uniform playing field, that's fine. So on that score, you decide to invite bids. So the bids come, and then one substance switch has been chosen on the basis that substance switch is going to do it free for the government. The build, operate, manage and transfer model for 25 years. First of all, for a BOT model for 25 years, for a technology
10 and then 15 and then probably
10
15 and probably
another
10.
10.
So I would say maybe 15 years, okay, well, that's fine, whatever the case may be. But if you look at the scenario where they attribute the amount of cost they are going to incur or whatever they decided to call it, first of all, for an interoperability operation, deciding that you need 1.1 billion cedis, $1.1 billion as capital to raise for this project in a country with a total of about, 14, 15 million subscribers for telecoms, right? Means that you are spending $1,000 per subscriber.
It's ridiculous.
That is how ridiculous it sounds. For anybody who is a banker or an investments appraisal expert, nobody would spend $1,000 per subscriber on mobile money switching. That's the first point. Second point, you are raising at $1.1 billion for a country of 27 million people for a technology project. It doesn't make sense on even an investment level because this country's market is so small. Third point, MTN made 40 million cedis last year from mobile money operations. 40 million cedis in a year. And MTN does about 85 to 90% of the total quantum of mobile money subscriptions. If MTN does 40 million, and we are going to do this for the next even 15 years, and you are charging $1.1 billion, not cedis. Then it means that all of MTN's revenue for the projected revenue for the past 10 years is what you are going to pay them.
Right.
How do you pay someone for that volume of transactions? So the regulator is actually being paid as much as the highest, operator in the system. And that is not his profit, that's his turnover. Then we go to the fact that, you are appraising 3 different contracts. One is 15 million. Is there 15?
14 million.
Okay, yeah, 40 million and some change. And then one is what, 5 million?
5 million, and then there's a 4.6 billion.
Note already that people already have the infrastructure. You say you will disregard it. So there's 40 million, there's 5 million. And then you come with the fact that you say that, oh, it is free. How free is free? Now, if you say it is free and the government is not going to pay, but people are going to pay, you are going to foist the payment for 25 years into people's pockets of an investment that somebody says he can use 40 million to do or 5 million to do, of 4.6 billion to do. Now, when you calculate the present value of payments for over 25 years at 10% of 4.6 billion, you get 454 million. All right? So it means that let's not even use the 4.6 billion anymore. You are saying that at present rates, for 40 million for a contract, 5 million for a contract, and 454 million for the same contract, and you give the one who's giving the 454 million, which is about 2,000% more than the nearest one. Now, if that is the case, and these were the results you got from the restrictive tender or whatever tender there was, then it means there's a problem with the terms of reference document that you created. For there to be such a variance within the, what do you call it, the bids. And then you say that, okay, only one of them was in the scope. Now, this is where all the Dariga comes in. Because what is the core functional system? The core functional system is an interoperability switch that allows that if I have MTN, I have Vodafone, I have Airtel/Tigo, and I have Glo and Expresso. This one can send money to this one. This one can send money to this one. Back and forth, two-way, all right, for all of this. And all you're operating is a switch, all right? That switch is software and a bit of hardware. Now, for the scale of 10 million, 10 million of, if let's say 50 million SIM cards running these things, let's assume that all of them are running mobile money connections, all of that. A software of that nature could cost anything. But what are the benchmark costs of it in other countries? I haven't been able to have time to check that. But even if it was going to be free, now let's look at this scenario, that the functional software is the one that's going to allow all these things to be done. If there is any extra scope, the scope will mean that maybe now there would also be a switch from, let's say, MTN to your bank account or your bank wallet, MTN to your your GIPS, your eSwitch account, MTN to maybe other payment systems like GCNet, government payment systems, all of that. Now, for anybody who knows technology, if you have the functional system as it runs, the only thing you need for it to communicate with other systems or other third-party systems is what you call API, all right? Or APIs, or application programming interfaces. These are things that take the language that is in the functional program that you have developed and make it translatable to other computer systems. So it's a way in which computers are talking to each other. Or not computers, computer programs are talking to each other. That is the same kind of system that you use to exchange your contacts from your Huawei phone to an Apple phone. All right? Or from what do you call it? From Excel to, let's say, Google Sheets or Microsoft Word to another document. So if you have a functional system, anything that allows a functional system to talk with any other system is called an API. And usually, whatever the cost of the functional system are, the APIs that you build around that system, any prudent technology investor will tell you that it shouldn't cost more than 20% of the actual cost of building the system. So when you come and tell me that these people satisfy the functional requirements, but their scope was larger, their scope is just the kind of APIs you are building. On God's green earth, there's no way APIs are going to cost you about 2,000% more than the next nearest bidder. It means that there is something wrong with the way you are couching the whole contract. And then when you look at all of these things, and then you look at the fact that they are still pretending that that thing is wrong, it shows a fundamental lack of remorse and lack of respect for even those of us in this country who run technical operations.
Salom, then I move to the left side here. I'm quoting the Deputy Minister of Finance, Cassiol Atuforsen, who...
That's former.
Yeah, former deputy, yes, who was in charge, yes, of this whole transaction. He says, and it's to tie into what you're saying, he says that the original system that the Bank of Ghana had wanted to engage Sipton to do had to connect all payment systems and also to link the likes of Ghana Link, including mobile money. And he says, so you have picked just the mobile money as a system and try to create interoperability. So that's what he's trying to suggest. That
yes, and it is dubious. It is completely dubious. I completely understand where he's coming from. And for a non-technical person, it might be something that is esoteric in nature. But the thing is this. Let me just give you...
Quickly, then
let me just give you a very simple example of how it is. when you are doing these things, you call something data. Data you exchange? What data do you exchange? Name of the person, phone number, amounts being transferred, charges on the amount being transferred, who is collecting the charges. Maybe 5 or 6 or maybe 10 parameters. Right. So those 10 parameters are what you create, you put out there, and then the other system takes those 10 parameters and imports it into your system. So it's like copy and paste. Right. Are you going to pay more 10 times more than the cost of the function system for a system that will help you copy and paste? No. So whilst he probably has his sentiments right, either he didn't make the right decision, or he was hoodwinked, or the people who are going to do the technology hoodwinked him, or they tried to use that as a justification to charge a huge amount. Now the final thing is this: in the what do you call the breakdown of the quotation of what they are going to spend the money on, I saw $400 million for electricity and $82 million for water. For crying out loud, if you need $400 million for electricity to power a system, a computer system, it means that you are being grossly inefficient. Because one, there are what do you call it? Then the likes of CNN and Wall Street and the rest, their power bills will spike into the high heavens. Because if you even come to me with such a situation, it means that you don't really know your job. That's one. And then two, then it means that you are using supercomputers to power something that is 10 million transactions in a day, even if it was 10 million transactions in a day. I run systems that power that kind of thing. And I can tell you that I've never paid a dime of electricity bill anywhere.
Very well. Thanks for that, Selo. Let me move here. Mr. Sokon, what do you think of all this?
Oh, a lot.
I mean, Selam sounded quite technical there, but at some point
I might also, in a way, but in terms of the law. Yeah. We will also try and break it down. But let me commence by expressing my own personal revulsion for the kind of choice of language of the person who described himself as CEO for SIPTIN. But for me, the contract I have here, and I have a copy here, I don't know whether there's a difference between a managing director and a CEO. But the person who signed, at least in 2006, as managing director is Kako, or is it Koko Sweetie Watanabe, and not this gentleman who insulted the entire people of Ghana. And I think that if they have any shame, maybe he doesn't. He should have come out to express maybe his remorse, if you like, to choose my friend's word. I can understand that when a contract of this wealth... Why would
he feel remorseful when he thinks it's justified?
Yes, what I'm saying is that, yes, so we will I mean, in public, but I'm sure people in their homes have much in worse language than that. But the point is that when a contract of this nature is cancelled, naturally, a person who was to benefit from it, a windfall, substantially, will be incensed. So that is fine. But when after that you have commenced arbitration proceedings in London against Bank of Ghana and by extension the people of Ghana, then you must hold your peace. Right. And you should not rub further pepper with garlic in our wounds. Because we are already hurt and injured. Now there's a contract here, which contract was prepared by lawyers for SIPTIN, and the dates they prepared it, which appears on the front pages, August 19, 2016. Then you get the SIPTIN representatives signing the contract on the same August 19, 2016. But this same contract, from the first page, said this agreement is made 24th day of August 2016. So what were they signing before the 24th day of August?
Maybe it's a typo.
No, I don't want to go that way. I'm looking at what is before me. This is an agreement which is duly executed. What it means is that, and that is why I wouldn't, maybe I wouldn't blame the company so much. What have they done? But the blame should be put at the doorstep of Bank of Ghana and all those who are involved in accepting these terms. What it means is that when the SIPTIN's company's lawyer, and I'm saying they are their lawyers because I've seen other documents, letters they have written reminding Bank of Ghana of the fact that they were breaching or violating some of the provisions. So they are their lawyers. Now, so when they drafted this, and as a lawyer, as you know, I have a duty to protect the interests of my client. So whatever terms that don't break the law or don't violate any laws of Ghana, there's no morality in this. I have to put them in. It is for the other party and their lawyers to ensure that these terms are matched with commensurate terms. In the first place, even before as I proceed, the Bank of Ghana, this whole agreement was in a draft. I mean, imagine, Bank of Ghana, Central Bank of Ghana, Republic of Ghana, established under the 1992 Constitution, and the Bank of Ghana Act 202, anyway, at that time it had been amended somehow. With his head office address, into brackets, no head office address is put there. That is a template that is usually sent during the draft stage. Then referred to as the regulator. If you are a regulator, what business do you have to enter into an agreement? That is where maybe the telcos should have been the people who should have entered into this agreement with this other company. Exactly. Or even the GIBS.
The GIBS, yeah.
Yes. Or the government of Ghana.
It's GIBS that should have
This whole thing, I'm told, was engendered by GIBS. For some reason, some people found it convenient to take it away from GIBS,
exactly,
which is a Bank of Ghana, a State of Ghana institution, and give it to a private person. It is very distasteful and hurting. I will remain cool. Now, a regulator who is a referee, what business do you have to be also a player on the field? That is one point. So Bank of Ghana had no business entering into this agreement in the first place, because they were compromised in terms of being a player and a referee. Not compromised in terms of maybe some monies, I don't have any proof. But the fact that you are a regulator and also a player on the field, there is no way you can convince me that you'll be a fair arbiter when it comes to even matters of this kind. Then also in a substantive way, this is an agreement that substantially couldn't have been performed. When you look at provisions in it, there's a provision called, that is 4.44, governmental action. And people tell us this is not about the government. So why is it that two persons have entered into an agreement and they say that when the government does this, it will be a ground for me to terminate? And one of them is the ensuring that, for example, failure of the government authority to grant or renew applicable permit. It's a governmental action and a ground for termination.
But so you should have met certain requirements to warrant a renewal of whatever permit it is. So if you're making that a ground, then it's quite problematic.
Well, it is the Bank of Ghana accepted this imposition on them, dealing with a private company with all your enormous powers, and which you have shown to us in recent times. So that is one. Even securing laws to ensure that they perform, it is a duty imposed on Bank of Ghana. And when they fail, this becomes a ground for termination. And I mean, you just can't understand. And they should forgive me, especially the lawyers who, and I know that some of them just exclusively dealt with this matter in the bank. And so I won't blame all the other lawyers. But this has been consistent. So you see termination 38. And one of them is the operator, it says, this agreement may be terminated in the following ways. By the operator as a consequence of government action referred to in clause 44.
And what does 44 say?
That is the government action I've referred you to. It is explained here. Nationalization, expropriation.
What is the guarantee that this document is the final document? That
the guarantee is that it is signed. It is duly executed. I can show it to you. And each page is signed. Shows the signature or initials of the company. Let me just show it.
No, that's fine. I mean, I have a copy of this as well, so I know.
It is here. Well, as far as I'm concerned, the seal of the company is on, even though the Bank of Ghana seal is not on, and they didn't even give us a date on which they signed. But at least we know that the company signed on 19th August 2016. I mean, if it's a mistake, they should let us know. So I'm saying that. So the 44 spells out all the government action. Granting of rights to a new entity to operate the Ghana retail payment system, that is a government action which will entitle them. Any effect of a change in law which is not resolved in accordance with clause 32. If Parliament passes a law, and so you are saying that this agreement should prevail over the laws, the government law, the contract that you have entered. And I'm not blaming them. Listen to this. This is even more hurting. Failure of government authority to grant or renew applicable permit. So maybe they need a permit, not maybe. One of the permits is a permit from NCA, which has been indicated here in course in Schedule 6. No, Schedule 8. Schedule 7 says list of applicable permits. 7. Electronic communication permit or license. So they go to NCA. NCA say we are not going to renew it. It's a ground for termination. And when the ground for termination occurs and they exit, Schedule 6 has a list of all the monies we will pay. It's enough to make you cry.
So the long and short.
So the first year we will pay 478,710.434 US dollars for the first year. The second year, in excess of 4 million. It goes down up to 25 years, even though the contract itself can be terminated after 15 years. Now, so when you have all this in an agreement, for me, as a business person and as a lawyer working for his client, they can put all this in it. To what extent?
It's for the other party.
Yes, and that is where I'm saying that. But as usual, and unfortunately, the political game has started, and the actual persons who caused this, and I think Honorable, one of our colleagues mentioned, we pay them with our taxes. Is this the best way they would have done, and especially the lawyer, is this the best way you would have done for your client as well? No.
But they are representing their clients and they would want, you would put
I'm not talking about the company's lawyers. I'm talking about the public lawyers in the Bank of Ghana. And I'm saying that I know for a fact that only a few people, to the exclusion of others, dealt with this particular matter. Unfortunately, they are still working. They are still working in the bank.
Not only was the price on the high side, but the terms of the agreement itself were
I'm saying that some of the terms were just from the beginning, ab initio, impossible to perform. And it can only generate, what do you call it, a ground for termination. But one last thing, perhaps it's a good window where we can get out of it. Now, it states that where within a year they have a term given to it, the company was unable to obtain some permits, then no right passes. So they have the condition precedent, which is also stated here. And just a second.
So no right passes, it would be
which means that neither party can have a right against the other. And as far as my inquiry will show, I understand that they were unable, as at that time, to obtain that license or permit. And for that matter, we may have, by the grace of God, a right under that, and perhaps we may be able to escape any condition precedent. 4, save and accept as provided in this clause. The rights, obligations of the parties under this agreement are subject to the satisfaction of conditions precedent to be agreed and specified in Schedule 8. Schedule 8 is, as I mentioned to you, procuring the license and the Electronic Communication Act, which I understand they were unable to. So the people shouldn't be, people should be calm.
But you said this is currently under arbitration in the...
Yeah, that's what I understand. It's under arbitration. And once again, this is something we've said over and over again. Why is it that even in the stream, the government of Ghana or its state institution entering into an agreement with a private company established under the laws of Ghana, it's even, you may accept if it's a foreign company, which I still disagree. But a local government, a local institution, and a private company enter into an agreement, they state that this agreement shall be interpreted and enforced under the laws of Ghana. But where there is dispute which we cannot resolve, we go to London Arbitration Center. Do they understand our laws better than we do? What is the necessity for all this?
Very well, Ms. Opon, thank you. I mean, you have raised the challenges with the terms and conditions of the agreement to add to the, alleged overpriced sum.
Yeah, that's what the economy is.
Exactly. So we will move to Honorable Kwam here. You were making comments here and there when the others were speaking. Now you have the opportunity to speak. You are saying you're providing this system at a relatively cheaper price, $4.6 million, calculated or converted to 18 million Ghana cedis or thereabouts. The minority is saying that, no, we were going to give, or SIPSIMS was going to give something way over and above what your system is currently doing or is eventually going to do when the various phases are completed. But you maintain that this is being given at value for money rates and it's very of high quality.
My sister, what is so new under the sun? Comparing the three contracts, one is 4.6 million.
Billion.
4.6 million Ghana's dollars. One is 5.5 and the other one is $1 billion. That is how they went for the tender. What is so new under the sun? They were all given the same platform to bid. Again, if you are to go to a market center to buy, let's say, tomatoes, and you are to buy the same tomatoes, which one will you go for? I think His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo and his government has done Ghana very good in terminating this contract, because similar thing happened if you look at the Ameri deal. The energy minister was able to save $300 million for the nation. And if you look at this, let's assume it's free, and the person is supposed, the company is supposed to operate it for the 25 years. You calculate 20% on the amount. I'm talking about the 480 million Ghana cedis, $4.6 million, which is 80 million Ghana. You calculate 20% on it for 25 years. You still come to about 800 million Ghana cedis. So, of course, it's telling you that this is in a bad faith. It's purely create, loot, and share. Oh, yes. This one is not different from this bus branding and other contracts which were being signed. I mean, it's so abhorrent. We shouldn't even entertain this in the first place. That is why we need to praise His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo to make sure that
beyond the praise, how do we ensure
because
these things don't
saving the nation with this
price
money.
Contracts constantly being heard. I mean, we talk about this all the time. So yes, you may do the praising, I mean, within your, I mean, the government, but to the citizen, the interest is, how do we ensure that we get value for money on all contracts that the state, I mean, like state agencies.
That is why, as at now, there's a special prosecutor who's going to deal with all these issues. And I'm sure with even this money, it can finance the free SHS, housing, affordable housing units, so many things in this country. Look, when I was coming, I was listening to one of the radios about mental health authority.
It's up for discussion,
yeah, and the money which has not been paid for over 6 years. Can you imagine this? The nation is engulfed with full indebtedness. And these are some of these create, loot, and share is what is causing all this. In fact, to be honest with you, with this money, we can even pay mental health authority. We can pay free SHS. We can build more schools.
We didn't pay anything.
Look,
yet.
all our roads are in deplorable conditions. My sister, the fact is, this 4.5 billion Ghana cedis can even service about 50 to 60% of our road network in this country. So this is in the back feet. Honestly, we shouldn't even entertain it at all.
But the truth of the matter is, no money was given to, I mean, like, that money was not expended.
We may pay about,
but if we had gone ahead, that is the situation.
I'll come to you, yes, Honorable. But Honorable Kwam, are you done with your submissions?
I'm done because the whole contract is in a shout.
Very well, Honorable Propo, quickly, you wanted to.
I'm just very saddened by the Honorable's anticipated expenditure. You know, you hear him recounting their own challenges, the challenges they have in unable to sustain mental health because they can't pay for the whole year. They haven't paid a person.
But there's a backlog.
The challenge of free senior high, they cannot find the money to pay. He's imagining that if this money were physical money, then he would have used it to do all that. It's not physical money. The man says, don't pay me anything. In fact, signing of the contract by the government now costs Ghana government $4.6 million. In the previous regime, if it were signed, it wouldn't have cost Ghana government anything at all. The difference is that this one, they are saying in 25 years, we'll be able to mobilize this amount of money. So
but despite you heard Salom, you heard Salom give. I mean,
but I understand. As I'm saying, I'm not a technical person. Right. I'm not the one who signed the contract. I didn't know that. That's why I admitted from the word go. But I'm saying that don't imagine that this is money Ghana government was going to pay and or has paid, and it could have done rules. You see, when you listen to some of the local language stations, the kind of mischief they do with these kinds of things,
But I think
you'll be surprised.
I think really.
But let us be clear: no money has been paid, except that, like he said, perhaps the situation is that the technicality about it was not understood by the policymaker. He may have been hoodwinked into thinking that there was some benefit in it. I'm not saying that.
But they are still, on hindsight, or with the benefit of hindsight, they are still justifying it. So there's no acknowledgement or admission that, well, perhaps maybe if I'd paid a little bit of attention.
So that for me is the worrying part.
And that is why I think that you should bring them here. You should let them explain, because none of us here appear to have the competence in understanding exactly what happened.
I mean,
we are all speaking from our point of view.
There's a techie guy sitting right next to you, and I think we can give him that respect that he knows what he's talking about.
He admitted that, look, policy is what he didn't understand. But as for the technical aspect, he understood and explained. And I'm saying that let the policy person come and explain why he undertook that policy direction.
So Bank of
and
Ghana,
then
they now disagree
and
with
let
the
us understand the whole dimension and the gamut of the problem.
The same company, a Bank of Ghana.
The issue is this that I want to point out, that it is not physical money that has been lost. So let nobody go sit anywhere and say that, oh, Ghana government has lost this. We could have used it to do ABC, build schools, do this, build roads. No, that is not the case.
But eventually, ultimately, it still boils down to what the value for money that we need to, ensure when it comes to these procurement transactions. Because ultimately, I mean, it's I think it can be overstated that it's the citizenry who suffer the brunt when it comes to the end of the line, really. With these kinds of arrangements, Mr. Opon raised a point here, which is, of course, in negotiations for such contracts, definitely it's up to the parties and their lawyers who are doing this to ensure that their interests are best served in there. So you wouldn't necessarily look out for the other party. You're looking out for yourself. Yeah. And the other party is also supposed to look out for themselves. But if you put yourself in a situation where, I mean, you just open yourself up to, whatever the other party would want to do, then that's quite bad, especially when you're looking at a state entity. And I mean, we just need to up our game when it comes to these procurement issues. And for me, I don't see why we still have procurement challenges recurring when we say that we have a PPA and a Public Procurement Act. I don't know what is happening to the system. We just a whole ministry for procurement. Well, we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll move into TOR and the Ministry of Energy. As it were, a standoff between the two sides. We'll see what's happening there. See you shortly. Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Newday Saturday edition. We are live on TV3, also live on 3FM 92.7, and we're online streaming live at 3news.com. Also on our Facebook page, TV3 Ghana. We just finished with the conversation around the mobile money interoperability system and the issues about the two contrasting or varying contract sums. We'll be moving on now to look at what is happening within the energy sector, where there seems to be a standoff between TOR officials and the Ministry of energy. So the Ministry of Energy earlier on in the year, I believe sometime in January, had actually hinted that plans are underway to have Tor converted to a tank farm in anticipation of the construction of a new refinery. And this refinery, the new refinery, is expected to have production capacity per day of about 150,000 barrels. Currently, Tor is supposed to do 45,000, but obviously underperforming there. So this back and forth is ongoing. We'll take a listen to the CEO of Tor, Mr. Isaac Osei, and also we'll have some reaction from the minority in Parliament, specifically the spokesperson on energy, minority spokesperson on energy in the person of Honorable Mutawakilu, and then we return to the panel for their perspectives on this. Let's take a listen.
Yeah, friends, colleagues, let me just say that I didn't come to Tor to preside over its demise. I've not come here to run this company in order that we end up by scrapping it. I think our government wants to add on. So far as I'm concerned, the new refinery that we are planning to build, it's part of our strategic plan. But it is also part of our strategic plan to ensure that the existing refinery works. And I have no doubt in my mind that with the technicians and engineers that we have, Tor, now in a better place than it has been for years, will work. And not only will it will work efficiently and effectively and give meaning to the government's program of ensuring that the industrial sector works well. I think there ought to be synergies also between the production that we find in our fields today and a refinery such as Tor. Additional refineries are welcome, and I think the government is right to ensure that we have new refineries in this country, probably in an export processing zone.
I don't see the reason why a minister makes a statement and the CEO who works under him is not aware of it, has not been briefed, has not been sat down and made to understand that government has changed its policy. What we sold to Ghanaians is this. They have bought it. Now we want to go this. That is a very serious problem. It can be converted to a tank farm. In fact, this is a legacy asset, a strategic asset to Ghana. So I believe that turning it to a tank farm is not the most.
Okay, so those were the town bites from the CEO of Tor, Mr. Isaac Osei, and Honorable Mutawakilu, minority spokesperson on energy. I'll start with you, Honorable Kwam, with this situation here. The government plans to set up or construct a new refinery with private sector.
Yes.
And that is supposed to have a capacity of 150,000 barrels.
Exactly.
Now, I mean, I think essentially what the concerns around is that currently Tor, with a production capacity of 45,000, is underperforming, not able to meet that. So shouldn't we be seen to be putting in more to ensure that Tor meets its capacity, production capacity? Then perhaps we look at expansion, bringing in more refineries. As it is now, you're not even able to meet your demand, yet you're looking at expansion. Is that justified, is the question?
I think yes, because if you look at the oil that we've started producing in this country, we need to add value to it. There's no way a country, Ghana as oil-producing country, should import refined oil from abroad for us to use it. It's a step in the right direction, especially where if we go on that tangent, we are going to create more jobs, adding value to the supply chain. I think that...
And what happens to your existing infrastructure, which is Tor?
No, that is where the misunderstanding is. But they haven't done anything. I think right now there's the need for the stakeholder to come on the round table to discuss the issue again. The CEO, the board chairman, and the minister should sit down and find a common goal for the benefit of this nation. I've listened to the deputy minister's
But why didn't that happen before this announcement?
Oh,
which is what Honorable Mutawakili was saying, that he finds it quite odd that the minister would put out something that, you know, seemingly
that is why I said there's some sort of misunderstanding here. And of course, this shouldn't even involve the president and even sitting them down to address us. It should be the stakeholders within. They need to go back and sit down, address the issue, and find a common goal. To me, that's how I feel it has to be done. But if you look at the 45,000 and 150,000, we need to make sure that we have a bigger refinery which will support this nation. Again, in the case of the tank farms, I feel that there's been the need to expand it so that when we're in, let's say, Ashanti region, northern region, or any part of the country, you can have access to fuel at an affordable cost. Because if we don't do it that way, even the transportation and everything is something which will...
we have more tank farms, is what you're saying?
Yes.
But definitely not to convert Tor to a tank farm.
No, not at all. That is why I said there's the need for them to sit down on a round table and solve the problem, find a common goal which will be of great benefit to the nation.
Very well. So you are for an expansion in terms of let's have more refineries, partnered, public-private. Let's do that. But the concern is what then happens to Tor, which is struggling and continues to struggle.
We need to revamp it.
Revamp it, which is what the Tor officials are saying.
Yes.
That let's, because indeed you heard Mr. Isaac was saying that he didn't come to supervise or superintend over the demise of Tor. Exactly. He came there, he came there to ensure that Tor is turned around.
Let's also not forget that we have an experienced engineers. We have very strong, powerful experts who will help even what you call it, the nation if we are to build the 150,000. So there's the need for them to sit down and plan around it and see exactly what they need to do. Because I don't think what is happening is healthy. And for the minister and the CEO, we haven't heard anything of that sort, beef between them. So once this one is saying this one is saying this, of course it means probably maybe there's a misunderstanding. They haven't started anything. It has not cost the nation nothing.
But it indicates a certain policy direction of the government for the ministers to say what he said. There's that intention.
Well, if that is the case, that is why I'm saying they need to sit down, so that if that is the policy direction of the government, then the CEO will have to oblige to. But for me, I think this is not an issue which we need to talk about it. There's the need for them to go sit down on a round table and iron the difference.
Lastly, with you still, and then I move to others. Still, I mean, if this indeed is a policy direction of government, then it raises question about how holistic the thinking through was, because the CEO is reported as saying that he doesn't understand why this is coming up when he talks about the fact that some investment has gone into Tor. A catalytic cracker, for instance, has been purchased with the hope to commence full operations. So, I mean, I'm trying to understand if there's this intention that we're going to eventually phase out or get Tor transitioned into some tank farm or converted into some tank farm, then why the investments currently? So what, you put in so much and at the end of the day you don't realize the benefits of what you sought to get by putting in those investments. And again, talking about returns on investment there. I mean, looking at it within the context of this policy direction, which is eventually we're going to phase it out. Would that be a prudent thing to do? Invest in it and just a few years down the lane, you move on to something else, you disband it as it were, and then move on to something else. What becomes of the investments that you've put into it?
That is why I said what the CU is doing must always be superintended by or supervised by the minister. So maybe the understanding between the two right from the onset were maybe different. But for now, once that the minister is speaking on this direction and he is also speaking on this tangent, I feel that when they meet to discuss this issue, by all means they will certainly find a good direction to iron that
things
difference.
out.
Yeah.
Very well. Mr. Pong.
Well, I think that generally this would have been needless, but on one hand, for persons to express dissenting views or divergent views, it's healthy. I mean, in the business world, you don't allow impositions, especially if you are the manager or the managing director of an institution. But we are looking at this in the broad view of the fact that the minister exercises part of the executive function of the president. And I think he's a cabinet minister. And therefore, I would be surprised if this major decision or idea was something that he fashioned out by himself. The Minister of Finance, or the Ministry of Finance, which is an integral part of these matters, was not aware. The Petroleum Commission, and all these analogous or relevant institutions, and the president himself. I think that, so if the policy of the government, then yes, as a managing director, you may have some powers, but you are subject to the ultimate powers of the shareholders. In this case, the minister. In fact, all these institutions, you'll be surprised to know that their shares are vested in the minister personally, even though it doesn't form part of his assets, which there was an interesting argument, yes, in court the other day when somebody argued that the ECG shares are vested in Minister of Finance. So the people of Ghana don't have any business. The judge asked, so when he dies, and he left no will, his customary successor and beneficiaries can go to court and claim ownership, or can he make a will with it? That's just by the way. Yeah. So the minister is the shareholder, representative of the shareholder, and ultimately the president, who is the, again, ultimate trustee of all the assets and the properties of the Republic of Ghana. So it will also tell you, and they say that when you see a person stumbled and falls, you don't, when he gets up, you shouldn't look for what he stumbled, cause him to stumble at the place where he fell. You have to go back. There appears to be a seeming tension, maybe expression of ego, for want of a better word, because otherwise there should be communication between the managing director and the supervising, to use his word, minister. And for the managing director, of course, to say that he didn't come to supervise the demise of Tor, what else should he say? Because if it's demise, he will lose his job. On the light note. All right? So you can clearly see that in the past, in my view, there hadn't been this synergy between them where you will have to report to the shareholder. The shareholder means the government, the minister, and ultimately the president. This statement, I understand, was finally made by the minister when they went to Texas recently at a conference of petroleum operators and owners and so on. So, but
he had earlier on in the year
intimated.
Put it out, yeah.
So that is where then there should have been previous communication. I heard a recording, I mean, not secret, between the minister and even the CEO. So the idea is not against the establishment of a new refinery, which is a necessity. But I think converting Tor into it. And why wouldn't the workers revolt? Because they will lose their job. But I think that I have also heard other explanation that, look, the main thing was that they are going to establish a bigger one at Tema. The apprehension had also been that it will be taken to Takoradi.
Right.
All right, there's one that will be built in Takoradi, or a number. And then this new one, I understand, will then also move the workers here into the new one. And even employ more because it's going to be bigger. And then the existing toll will be used as a tank farm.
But that cannot be a given necessarily, like granted, because it's public-private partnerships.
Yes, of
If
course.
you have a private entity come in, you can't
But
necessarily...
then what will inform the public-private, if it's efficiency, then toll itself must also look within. Are all the employees also necessarily important for us to achieve our goal? If they are, then there should be no fears that they will not be taken by the new company.
Right.
So I think that it's bigger than we see. And I don't think the president shouldn't be involved. He should be. They all act in his name. They are under the constitution. He's subordinate. So he has to call them. What is the problem? Because it also embarrasses the guy. And I see that a number of times. What MPP don't have is space. And they don't create the space for themselves. Because usually, either one scandal, needless scandal or the other, which they could have resolved. Like this one, we would have been sitting here. We'll be talking about positive programs that they have implemented. But we sit here, and each day or the other, or 1 week or the other, we talk about things that they have engendered themselves, which they could have avoided. And one of them is this. If this thing has been... So even the CEO, after hearing this, what stops you from approaching the minister and saying that, Mr. Minister, this comes to us as a surprise. My people are agitated. So what informed this? Then he will tell you that, oh, this is what I meant when I said so. And this is a government program. We have voted for the president. This is what the president wants us to do. If it costs him politically, it will cost him politically. If he will implement it and lose about substantial part of the workers of Tor from voting for him, and that is what he thinks the generality of the Ghanaian people will benefit, then it is the policy of the government. And you as the CEO, I'm afraid, it's not a private company, which even that, I repeat, you'll be subject to directions ultimately by the shareholder. Right. So, and these things has come up. You know the Ghana cylinder issue also. And a number of them, it is, for me, substantially, it boils down to egos. And it is about time the president, and for the first time since I became aware of this thing, this president appointed these people in the public. He will mount the podium and then call their names and give them their position. In the past, a lot of them were done by the chief of staff and so on. So he attaches a lot of importance to this. When that is done, and these things start coming, Metro Mass and so on, it can only embarrass the ultimate holder of government power, which is the president. Right. And if he doesn't step in, there are a lot of people who feel they should have gotten certain position, they didn't get it, they've gotten what didn't meet the expectation. And for me, I say that throughout, it is just about, I should have gotten this job, I didn't get it. And therefore, I will not take instructions from you. And if you want
being speculative on that one.
Oh, well, I mean, we can speculate about these things. It is part of what we do.
Very well.
We are speculators sometimes. But I'm saying that because it's becoming consistent, and usually, and I listen to the Ghana cylinder, the two personalities. I mean, you cannot say that I'm speculating when I say with certainty that it was about ego.
Very well.
This current one, I don't see why the CEO should take up a disagreement with the minister in public. If it's not about ego, then I don't know what it is about.
So it's your concern has to do with the nature in which that disagreement occurred. If it had
I'm saying that it is healthy.
Because dissenting opinions
it's
are
healthy.
really
That is
important.
why the boardroom is there. It's healthy. But when you come out openly and disagree at this level, this is not one of, as I said, there are quite a number.
Right.
Then it's becoming worrying. And I'm saying that in my own summation, if it is not ego, then I don't know what it is.
Very well. Salom, quickly let me bring you in here. What do you think?
You know, some of these things, a lot of these decisions go beyond the purview of just political appointments and political appointees. What is the issue at hand? The issue at hand is a financial decision-making and an engineering decision-making, scenario. because you are looking at the situation where you are looking at the feasibility of carrying out operations on a plant that has been loss-making and has effectively been a tank farm for the past, so many years, has racked up lots of debts, which is the fault of governments of two people sitting here. And
I'm not one of them.
I said two.
Two people.
So the guilty parties are quiet. Of two people sitting here. And basically, that lack of stewardship has meant that you had equipment that was installed way back in 1960, which was one of the icons of industrialization of an era past, being run down into what became a debt. A debt magnet, if you put it that way, and probably a source of siphoning funds from the state by corrupt state officials. Some investment was put into the place to have what they call a residual fuel catalytic cracker, and that aspect or that unit of the system is still financially viable and operationally viable. However, there are parts of the system that have become old and dilapidated, and possibly, if you look at it in terms of what they call valuation, what's that thing? Depreciation. Some of them have reached the place where they are functionally obsolete. So now the decision is a go or no go. Do we, now that we have been able to revamp it, it's kind of like you have an old car that was just parked. Now you think you can make it into a taxi. Because of that, you've gone to buy an engine and you are spraying it. You say, okay, now that you want to use that, they say, oh, use it as a container. You get it. So now the argument is, should it be okay, it's a van. So should it be a van or it should be a container? Now that is basically the thing. So now the argument is, if I've put a new engine inside and it can still make some money, why don't I use it as a van for a small period of time?
Even though it's not meeting the daily capacity levels, which is 45,000, it's not making that.
It's not making that, but there is a component of the mechanism which was invested into. So that investment has probably some cash outflow, projections. So if you are able to utilize that and it adds value, you see, in a lot of these discussions, we always put human elements ahead of the value proposition. What is the value proposition? Is it going to add value? If it is going to add value, why not? If it is not going to add value, it's going to depreciate value and be a cost. A cost machine.
It's pretty much a liability.
Exactly, a liability. I didn't do accounting. So if it's going to be a liability, then we look at it in that way. We have to be very pragmatic about these decisions and remove the politics and the humor. So for some of us, you see, it is this wrangling that really devalues the quality of our government. Although the discourse is required, we need to look at also the considerations. So we want to get a new, $4 billion, refinery. It's part of a master plan. And in the scheme of things, that $4 billion refinery might be better suited for more modern operations, like running the light sweet crude oil, which we produce here and which we are wanting to do. Are we also going to do petroleum derivatives and other things out of the new refinery? Those are the questions that should be answered. So if it's an engineering question as to, okay, if this new, refinery is going to be one for all, let me just put it one for all, so that there are so many different subcategories of the refinery products that will come out of it. So in terms of petroleum derivatives, in terms of other residues that can be used for industrial activity, etc. If all that is going to be done in this new one, then the old one, if the catalytical cracking units can still make some money, why don't we still let it make the money? Because then maybe it could even sometimes take the load out of the new one. Because what in West Africa, or where we are right now, where we are positioned, demand for energy is only going to rise because you have a young population and a more prosperous, generation coming up. So it means that demand for energy is going to rise. So it might.
In any case, Ghana wants to be a hub for
industrial activity.
Yes, and then also energy something.
Exactly. So then the point is this, that if we do the strategic projections, 5 years, 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line, if this still provides some kind of residual value in terms of its output, then the justification should be that, okay, if we look at the engineering involved and then the cost of engineering involved, should we still let it proceed? Or it is better just left as a tank farm? Because then if it is left as a tank farm, then what are the pros and cons? Does it add, cumulatively, what is the value add or what's the value subtraction? So for me, that's the thing. Those are the things that should be brought to bear. As to whether somebody is answering to a subordinate or not, it's a matter of internal corporate governance and the human relations issues amongst them. But in all of these things, it should never be, or the discussions should not be linked to because I am a minister, I say X, and you are a subordinate, you say Y. No, what is the value proposition? If both of them put out the data, then we can argue with the data. That is what they, because of they are the ones in charge, that is what they should be projecting for us to be making decisions from. And this is what I support completely.
Very well, which is, I mean, in sync with what the Deputy Minister, what's his name? Amin Adam is saying, because he's saying that the ministry is open to counter proposal on the way forward, but there's the need to center the dialogue on the economics of refineries, the efficiency of the kind of refinery, the need for expansion of TOR's operations to meet our domestic demand, the need to add value to Ghana's crude oil, and the potential for creating more jobs.
He has said very articulate about it, because that is really the core of the matter. And he's an expert.
So that's what we should do. Yes, Honourable. Definitely, minority says we would fight tooth and nail to, you know, prevent this conversion of TOR into a tank farm, because it's a national asset. Now, when you hear somebody like the Deputy Minister give the parameters for the dialogue, what do you still want to hold on to this issue about TOR being a national asset? Should that be the main, if you like, indicator or the main feature you're looking at determining this issue that we have? If you have a national asset and it turns out to be a liability, do you still hold on to it as a national asset?
Well, nobody has conveyed that to us. And for the Deputy Minister, these parameters he has given will not be adequate for me to take a decision. He should not be giving me parameters. He should be informing me about what has happened with TOR since they have taken over. But sadly, this is a very confused policy outlook. And it's disturbing that a policy, in policy making, there are three issues that are very critical. What you intend as a policy, who is making it, who are the stakeholders, how do you communicate it, how do you communicate the policy, you know, to the receiver, to the person who is directly touched by the policy. It doesn't look like they have defined the policy properly, and it's not communicated also properly. If it were communicated, defined properly, the Deputy Minister would have said that, look, after doing all the mathematics, we have found that it is not economically viable into 20 years or into 10 years or into 5 years. It's absorbing this amount of money and it's creating this amount of debt. As a result, we can't operate TOR anymore. And he will carry the rest of us along. Right now, he's still thinking about what people should be thinking along. We are not going to think along those lines. We would want to get experimental, or let me say, empirical figures that would establish some truth.
Exactly. But isn't that what will speak? Wouldn't that go to the economics of the refineries?
That's what I'm saying. He
Which is what
he's proposing as one. He shouldn't be speaking in vacuum. These are theoretical descriptions he's giving. He should be giving us with concrete empirical evidence that, look, my minister has said this because of A, B, C, D, you know. But essentially, I think that sometimes you break ranks to fight for the nation. And once I heard Honorable Kwam, and he was very forthright. He said, look, the two should sit down and talk, and it's good. And he was only short of saying that I support the fact that TOR should not be sold. The fact is that
to be converted into a tank farm.
Sorry, to be converted into What is a tank farm? Why, if there is a need for it, has it been discussed? Is it a necessity now? If it is a necessity, okay. If it's a necessity, why don't we construct one? Why do you have to convert?
So again, you're looking at the economics here, as opposed to constructing one and converting TOR to that. which
look
would
at
be
the
most,
cost of dismantling this huge edifice and then reconstructing something in its place itself is much more costly than when you secure a space and then you are, for me, that's what I imagine.
What would you say to those who are saying that arguably Tor, for the longest time, has pretty much, in fact, Selim also said it here, has been operating as a tank farm?
Well, that depends on what exactly a tank farm is. But for now,
what
we know is that the new CEO is talking about a commitment he has made, financial commitment he has made, the catalytic cracker that he has bought and fixed. It has been a major problem for Tor. And if he's gotten it now, then the only way to go is out front, to move in front. You see, there's something that we have to be careful about. In economics, a promise of income, just a promise of income, will let you go wild in your expenditure. At the end of it, you realize that the money is not coming. You have already expended your money. You know, in my youth days, I was constructing something, a place. I was reconstructing my house, and then somebody said, "Oh, he has something for me, a very critical something that I will use in fixing my washroom," and then. But he said that what I had now, I should throw it away. I said, no, I need it. He insisted, don't just throw it away. I will give you a better one.
It never came.
I threw it away. And then I never got the other one.
Okay, so the rest they say is history. In the bush. On that note, we'll take a break. When we come back, we go look at some international matters involving the unfortunate killings of some 44 Ghanaian nationals in the Gambia. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is Newday Saturday Edition live on TV3 and also on 3FM 92.7. We'll be moving on next to look at the 44 Ghanaians that were killed in the Gambia in 2005. 13 years down the lane, what has happened, the pursuit of justice, where are we on that? This week we heard of some attempts to revive the campaign for justice for the deceased persons, and the survivor, one of the survivors, or indeed I believe the only survivor, yes, is here, and he is leading this campaign supported by some international human rights organizations. We'll take a listen to some piece we have of him, Mr. Tre, I believe is his name, and then return to the panel for their quick perspectives on this. Then we move on to the all-important subject of mental health in Ghana, and how for the past almost close to 6 months into the year, no disbursement has been made to any of the psychiatric institutions in the country. So let's take a listen to the story on the 44 Ghanaians that were killed in the Gambia some 13 years ago.
This is Martin Tre, the lone survivor of the Gambian killings.
One man whose wife is here was complaining about, suffering of his hand, and the man came in with callus and just removed his shoulder here. He just take it and his hand was off.
And this is the son of the said man, 10 years old at the time.
When we were doing the funeral, it would have been good if I can see my father's corpse. Just to say bye to him.
13 years on, the tears flow easily from those who love them the most, the 44 Ghanaians who were killed in the Gambia. They were among other West African migrants who were en route to Europe to seek greener pastures, but were mistaken for mercenaries in the Gambia and executed by a paramilitary death squad known as junglers who took orders from ex-President Yahya Jammeh. These families are part of over 1,000 victims in the Gambia who have suffered atrocities under Jammeh's 22-year rule. Previous investigations by the ECOWAS and United Nations only concluded that rogue elements in the Gambian security service were responsible for the crime. But a new movement, led by the families of the victims, Human Rights Watch and Trial International, proves otherwise.
We interviewed some of the highest ranking security officials of the Yahya Jammeh government.
Okay, quickly. So we'll do this in a touch and go manner here. We are having this situation because this week I think there was some meeting of sorts around this issue, and it's coming to light that Human Rights Watch organization, alongside some other international human rights organizations, have done their own investigations, spoken to former officials who worked with Yahya Jammeh, and it's coming to light that indeed, contrary to the reports by a joint committee report of the UN and ECOWAS, which said those instructions were not necessarily directly from Jammeh, they are saying that their investigation shows that indeed it wasn't from rogue elements of the security services, but that they were actually by people who took orders directly from Yahya Jammeh. So the question is, where are we now? How do we pursue this justice for the Ghanaian nationals who lost their lives in that gruesome attacks? Mr. Pong, if you could take us away with this one quickly.
Thank you very much. It's very sad indeed to hear that Africans are doing this or have done this to their own brothers and sisters, and we can only ask that the right thing should be done by at least giving Mr. Yahya Jammeh the opportunity to be heard, and that would mean that there should be a trial as to whether or not his own previous colleagues or who are also in government now and who must take steps, bold steps, to ensure that he returns to his country or any other country that the law, international law permits, he should be tried. And that should be done. And the idea that people didn't take instruction from the president, I think it's been issues, the Nuremberg trials and all that have shown that whilst people have personal responsibility to ensure that they don't commit crime, those who gave them instructions have also been part of such trial. So I think if they can identify some of those who engage in this dastardly act of killing, even if they are not innocent persons, you have no right to engage in extrajudicial activities like this. That also is a crime. And therefore, I think the entire African continent and the leaders should come together, assess the situation, and if it becomes necessary, and I think it is, for him to face trial from wherever he is in any country. But again, you see that an obviously non-African, I think is the lawyer, is the one who is leading. The rest of us who are also even lawyers here, I think we can also take it up upon ourselves and ensure that it becomes very difficult for others to do so. Unfortunately, while they are in power, we are unable to do that.
The other part is because we really need to, yes. Honorable Pilpo, on this quickly.
Well, this is a very sad thing that has happened. It also tells us that never again should we go back to military regimes or one-man rule or situations where you have too much power in the hands of one person who can cause mayhem and death to Ghanaians and all other citizens. You know, Yahya Jammeh was simply afraid of his own shadow. He was informed that there was going to be an invasion of his country by some people who wanted to overthrow his government. Having heard that there were people in high seas coming into his country, he ordered his military to arrest them. And when they arrested them, the consequence is what we are discussing today. And so it's a very bad thing that has happened, but it also tells about the quality of leadership we have in Africa.
Very well. I think we'll end it there because of the time constraints.
We just have to make sure we investigate before we act. The life of every person is very important.
Very well. Salam.
Well, I believe Yahya Jammeh is ultimately culpable in this particular case because you are ruling over a country with 2 million people, with an with only an army size of only 2 infantry battalions, totaling between 800 and 1,000 soldiers. That is even the total number of soldiers is even less than a primary school in Ghana. So if you are telling me that there are rogue elements in an army of 1,000 people that killed 44 Ghanaians, then you are ultimately culpable, because if you said you are Haji said doctor, whatever it was, you should have been able to identify who those rogue elements were and put them to tax. If he hasn't done that, he is ultimately culpable and he has to pay compensation to the families.
Very well. Honorable Kwam.
This is what sometimes I find it difficult. We have ECOWAS, we have EU, yet when such incidents happen, they don't say anything. They just sit down for others from outside to come and advise us as to what we should do. Personally, I feel that.
And then other times we begin to talk about sovereignty issues. They're taking away our sovereignty and all that.
That is it. Personally, I feel that we need to try the former president of Gambia because the atrocities are too much. And yes, it's even more than
Humanity.
that. And we need to make sure that those people who suffered that deaths should be compensated, adequately compensated.
Very well. We have just about 10 minutes to go, but I still want us to squeeze this in. The issue about mental health in Ghana and the fact that there's a seeming neglect of this. Psychiatric institutions in the country not received disbursements or allocations of any sort, leading to several challenges of the psychiatric institutions. We have a tape of the Mental Health Authority CEO, Mr. Dr. Akwesi Osei. Let's take a listen to him and then return to the panel quickly.
Have you received your 2018 budgetary allocation?
We have not. To date, almost the middle of the year. Almost, we are the middle of May, and that is almost towards June, and that makes it half of the year. We have not received a pesewa from the central government, from the ministry, from the government. Not a pesewa. The psychiatric hospitals have not received a pesewa. So you can imagine how are they surviving?
No, let me find. How are they surviving? Do you know?
Well, that's a big question. Well, they are only living on credit. Well, I must say, part of it, they are living on credit. Part of it, they are cost sharing.
Not a pesewa received by the psychiatric institutions, according to the CEO of the Mental Health Authority, Dr. Akwesi Osei. Honorable Kwam, what is happening?
I feel that this shouldn't have come on the public domain because
it shouldn't have happened, or that it shouldn't have come into the public domain?
No, it shouldn't have even happened at all. Because if he says nothing, when MPP government came into power, for almost 6 years, they were in debtness. Right now, last year, they had about 9 million Ghana cedis being paid to them.
And that was to clear backlog?
Yes. They use some to pay their electricity bills and others. But some of the money, chunk of the money, was just sitting there. So by the close of the year, the money was returned to the government chest. So I'm even surprised that they didn't take that advantage of using that money. However, going forward...
When you say the money was sitting there, what do you mean?
They had 9 million. 1 million Ghana cedis was paid to Mental Health Authority. Then 8 million was paid to Anchor 4 Pantan and Accra Psychiatry. The money, after using some to pay their electricity bills and other bills, the rest of the money was just sitting in their account.
Was that for the 2017 disbursement?
Yeah, that is it.
So that you had already dealt with the backlog, because reports are that there's the backlog of debt.
Yeah, there's debt.
So that has been cleared?
But I was suspecting that they used some of the money even to clear the debt. But that was not done. But if the money is sitting idly for the sake of mismanagement and corruption and other things, the money will certainly return to the government chest. But going forward, I know that by close of June, they will get their money.
But why has it taken this long for 2018 disbursement to kick in?
Look, this country has been engulfed with debt. We are all aware of it. But then, even with this 2 million euro bond that was raised, about the chunk of it is going to be used to defray the debt, so that the little remaining is what we are going to use it for other things. So when this money comes, certainly the money will be used to pay some of their debts.
Let me go to the extreme end here. What do you make of this fellow? This whole bizarre. I find it so bizarre.
It's very bizarre, and I think that the Mental Health Association also probably needs some evaluation in terms of its leadership and in terms of their efficiency in managing these situation. Because I believe that in this particular situation, they need to be a bit more accountable and try and justify the reasons why monies sent to them were not utilized. I think that for some of these authorities, we do not necessarily need doctors to run them. They should be in the wards and let administrators run them. One of the biggest problems we've had in this country for quite a long time is that if you look at Ghana Medical, what do you call it, all these particular sub-sectoral bodies, you go and take somebody who was trained as a professional in that field to run the administrative duties of that body. And what happens is that those people do not have the right administrative acumen to run the system because they are trained in other fields. So it is time that we began to separate the administrative function and the organizational oversight function and give it to people who are competent managers so that these people can practice their professions.
Very well. Now, according to Dr. Say, they've had to resort to borrowings, credits, and there's been several lawsuits against them. And I'm thinking, how are they even going to get through courts with all these lawsuits hanging on them?
Yeah, this is a very serious thing, and we need to tackle it head on.
Yeah.
You know, it shows that the government has failed in that bit. It's not just there alone.
Oh, yeah.
Why is our teaching hospital in Legon not being used? The Ministry of Health has so many problems, and I think that the cheap compounds that are all over, lots of them are still empty. You know, this mental health problem, it's not just a day's problem. It's been there.
Because actually there's been a backlog of debt for 6 years running.
That's inefficiency in organization and management. Like he said, I saw some of them who demonstrated against their chief executive and said they didn't want him anymore. Not this one. This one, Akwesi, has been very well, has performed very well in the past and now. And I've seen also that we went to inspect there as a committee member of the Employment Social Welfare. We went to inspect the Pantai Hospital and we realized that there has been no investment in that area for quite a while, for a long while. So I think that it's high time we should turn our attention towards the hospitals. Do we need them? If the answer is yes, let's put some money there.
Right.
If we don't need them, let's close them down.
But we do need them, definitely.
And we need them. So this challenge of asking, getting them to go borrowing, face court actions, and Pantai is full of court challenges and everything that you can think of that is negative.
That's quite worrying.
So it's important that government should listen to this man without blaming him and work towards resolving the challenges. It's very important.
Very well, thank you. Now, Mr. Opon, quickly, Dr. Osei talks about the fact that attempts to get Parliament to pass an LI, which would set up a mental health levy to finance mental health, has proven futile. What do you make of this?
Well, but that is interesting to know, because LIs come from, and the CIs come from various institutions through the Attorney General to Parliament. So to what extent has he also put pressure on the authorities? Because, I mean, the matters concerning psychiatric issues and so on, they are very important. Right. And it also fits into how we even see people who are even our relatives and are having mental problems. I mean, even when they are healed and they are brought back home, we still see them as people who should not be part of us. And perhaps that fits in, because in 2017, Dr. Osei said, according to him, well, there were no budgetary allocations for 3 psychiatric hospitals in the country in 2016, a situation which would pressure on the managers, and that the government is abusing the rights of mental health patients. But they can also enter into some private arrangement. They have a huge land at Pantai, which they have allowed people to trespass on, and there had been even demonstration from there. Why can't they get lands commission, for example, then maybe alienate portions of this land, invest the money into maybe profit-making ventures, and then they can use the proceeds. Yes, they can use the proceeds to take care, because we really need to ensure that some of these are curable. Sometimes they just need a place. But remember the Anas expose. So internally, they also have to look into their own internal affairs. If people bring donations, the government pays these monies, and the very workers there who are now complaining are the ones that engage in pilfering and taking, well, I mean, those we saw, honestly, well, since it's offense, it's still an alleged pilfering. But we saw it, where people are so wicked that food meant for mental patients or psychiatric patients, you just take this clothing and go out and sell them. How much more wicked can you be? So internally, they also have to examine, please, and we plead that the Minister of Finance, within a week, at least, as much as you can organize, take it there, because if they bring them out, as they've been threatening to do, we are going to be at the receiving end, and we still need to ensure that they are healed.
Very well. Thank you so much. That's all the time we have for today's conversations, and we thank you so much for spending your Saturday morning with us. We thank you so much. Also, thanks to the panelists. We had Honorable Joseph Albert Kwam, also Mr. Yao Pong. We also had Honorable Dr. Abdul Rashid Hilpo and Selom Brantier. Thank you so much, gentlemen. We'll see you here same time next week on the same network. Bye-bye. Have a good weekend.